I would be tempted to make the comment, kind of fallen off, and the Hawkeyes are in prime position to not take it down to the wire, but to get things wrapped up this week as they host the Illini of Illinois. Hawkeyes live right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you all stopping by. Leave those comments and questions. Consider the Super Chat contribution. Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App as well are available. Mark Rogers or Mark Rogers TV, but please notate that this is for the Iowa show, and the guy that makes it all work for us here each and every week, Corey Bratta from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Hey, Corey.
Hey there, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing well. You're on the road.
I am. Iowa Creighton today over here in Omaha, so it should be a good day, a good opportunity to cover a road game. And it's going to be a challenge. Creighton is a top 10 team, number 8 in the country, the AP poll. Got a lot of talent coming back, a lot of size, a lot of shooters. And Iowa, of course, very inexperienced and not as much size. And it's just going to be hard because they're not known. Obviously, Iowa's France teams are not known for playing defense. So I don't have a whole lot of expectations. I recorded a segment with Tim Kruger earlier today. If people missed that, they can head over to my channel from the Hawkeye of the Storm and listen to it. But 2-part segment. Tim talked about, he covers Creighton for Rivals, for Blue Jay Banter, and he also does bracketology for Stadium in March. So I've known Tim for quite a while, and he's very high on this Blue Jays team. So I'm excited to be inside CHI arena this evening. I've never been there before. I plan on making a couple of stops, some of my favorite stops in downtown Omaha to get some ice cream prior to the game. Little perks of what these road trips are like. That's what makes them special. So I'm looking forward to it.
I've been to Omaha twice. You can probably guess why. And also, you answered my question about Creighton men's basketball. I was going to ask, are they as good as they typically are?
When you say I probably know why. What are you talking about?
The College World Series.
Oh, I didn't know that you covered the College World Series.
Yes, 2 occasions to the College World Series in Omaha. Yes.
Do you know the ice cream place that I'm talking about?
No,
it's kind of famous. Okay. I won't plug it on here, but it's a downtown place that I guess is pretty famous. In fact, some friends of ours took us there when we visited Omaha like a year and a half ago. And I didn't know at the time it was famous. Then all of a sudden I was reading some article online about, best ice cream places in America or something. And it was like top of the list. So it was really good. I'll say that. So I'm looking forward to that.
You were going to drive me to go get some ice cream now. This is going to spur me on to want some ice cream.
Are you an ice cream guy?
I have to be encouraged.
Are you an ice cream guy?
Oh, I love ice cream.
Really? You're an Oreos guy and you're an ice cream guy.
Yeah, I shouldn't even talk about how much I can consume at one time. Like I can eat.
Well, you do that with a lot of things. You do it with the Oreos as well. But
yeah, that's I got to stay away from it. Yeah.
What about cake and pie?
I'm not a big pie guy.
Okay.
During the season, pumpkin pie, really good with the Ready Whip on it, preferably. But but I'm not going to eat it at any other time of the year, and I'm not going to turn down a piece of pie. But I don't go out and purchase it.
Sure. Well, how many of us actually go out and purchase pies? I mean, typically it's something you might get.
Yeah.
You go to a Bob Evans or a Perkins or something like that. You get a piece of pie, but.
I've been going to meet a friend a couple times a week at a Dunkin' Donuts, and it's difficult for me to walk out and not buy a couple donuts on the way.
I'll be honest, I'm not just saying this because Dunkin' doesn't sponsor your show. I've never been a huge fan of Dunkin'. I mean, it's okay. We don't live far from a Dunkin', and it's just like, it's okay.
Yeah, it's not the best donut.
I'd rather a Krispy Kreme.
Yes, Krispy Kreme's the best.
Yeah.
We have
one thing you don't know, Mark, is we have a chain that actually started up in La Crosse, and everybody on this chat will know what I'm talking about because they are from around here. But Quick Trip, which is not QT but KT, Quick Trip is the company, and then they have down here, they actually have stores called Quick Star, because QT, which is more of a, I think they started in Oklahoma, but they also have a branding in Iowa. They couldn't be named the same thing, so they Quick Star or Quick Trip, I should say, rebranded to Quick Star here in Iowa, and they have excellent donuts, very much like Krispy Kreme. They're called Glazers, and they're not probably quite as good as Krispy Kreme, especially when you can go to an authentic Krispy Kreme where they make them right there and they go through the machine and they come out hot. Boy, I could easily pound away 10 of those. Same thing with chocolate chip cookies. I have no issue if they're good chocolate chip cookies. soft in the middle, crunchy on the outside. I can pound away a dozen of those easy. Or with some pecans in there as well. Beautiful. So, anyways,
Yeah, we could keep going on this topic for sure. Absolutely, we could. But I've been
we are
trying.
about to talk about that. Some have coined, this is not me, but some have coined Deacon Hill as the Pillsbury Throwboy.
I've
So,
heard that. Yeah,
I didn't come
it
up with it,
fits.
but we have a segue right into football, Mark.
Nice transition. Well done, right there. So we have plugged, I don't know how many brands at this point, and none of them are sponsoring here. And I have to be careful at times because I don't want to speak negatively about a potential sponsor. So we'll not name anyone else.
Well, I will say this, John. We already talked about Quick Start. John Maybanks in the chat says I had Glazers today, and I believe last I knew, Quick Star was like the official pizza of Iowa athletics. I think. I keep up on their sponsored deals, but they are a good company. They are a good company. So I would love to. We need to reach out to Quick Star. So if anybody's got connections to Quick Star, let us know.
Oh, pizza sounds good as well. I was trying to determine, and it just hit me because you were talking about all these local brands in Iowa, that I made a comment this week, and actually, one of our loyal viewers, Erica, called me, and we were talking about, or maybe we traded these comments on Twitter, one or the other. And I had made a comment about needing to get to an Iowa football game, but there was something in particular that spurred me to do that on this occasion in particular. Well, it was, of course, at the end of the first quarter and witnessing, of course, the wave and how inspiring that is. It never in any way disappoints in tugging at the heart, for sure.
And I know one thing, not to go off on the wave, but it's funny when that tradition started. It was, now I forget his name, but you know the song "Wave on Wave." Maybe you don't even know that song. Who did that? It wasn't this huge hit, but they would play that song. Lay upon me, wave on wave. They would play that every single time they do the wave, and it's kind of cool. But then they said, "Okay, we want to change the song," and everybody's like, "What? What are you doing?" And oftentimes, I understand a lot of decisions with Gary Barta involved were not ones that I approved of or that I liked. But here's what they did, Mark, and this was, I think, before last season. They changed it to where the kids captain, okay, and the kids captain, of course, is somebody associated with the Children's Hospital. The kids captain would pick the song for that week, and I think that's just awesome. I just do, because it doesn't matter if it's. I'm trying to think of what some of the popular kids songs. I mean, little kids songs, right? Like, "What Does the Fox Say?" or "Baby Shark." All these different songs, like. That's great. I think it's great. And I think it adds to the tradition. So I'm all for it.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Pat Green. Yes. MFin. Pat Green did Wave on Wave.
So do you realize, Corey, that we typically get on here in the middle of May with nothing going on, and we're talking football within 30 or 40 seconds off the top. We've gone 8 minutes with the Western Division Championship on the line and ready to be won on Saturday, and we have yet to hit football here. But you did mention Deacon Hill, and we didn't have much time to talk about it yesterday. Corey dialed into the Big Ten live show that we do every Monday, 6 o'clock Eastern time. Shameless plug on the main channel. And I just mentioned Deacon Hill, but I had to send you a couple text messages that, and I was not being sarcastic in any way or condescending in any way. Now, and I don't want to overplay that suddenly they have found this prolific passing attack. They threw for 200 yards against a really good defense last week and gained over 400 yards of total offense. Again, once we get the large research staff here and at your channel that we will have one day, we will look up these sorts of things, or have them. I would like to know the last time they gained 400 yards of total offense, and especially in a Big Ten game or a Power 5 game.
October 1st, 2021. I believe that was Maryland. I think.
Okay, the 51-14 game.
Correct.
The big blowout game. Okay, the Friday night game.
Yep.
I think that was also one of the first times we probably got together.
Well, it was that year we started.
For some reason, I just
12.
remember that game, and I think, okay, that's when we first.
Well, I know we had Steve Suter. We had Steve Suter, former Maryland
That's
Terrapin,
right.
on that week, and there was a lot of hype. Those two teams were, I believe, were both undefeated, and yeah, as I recall, 7 turnovers for the Terps, 6 interceptions for Taulia. He was pretty young, but up and coming star. I'm glad Iowa didn't have to play him this year because I know they've struggled here of late, but I think I still think he's one of the 3 or 4 best quarterbacks in the conference, and he's got a chance even with his size to play in the NFL. But yeah, that was the last time, October 1st, 2021, they surpassed 400 yards. If they had to take one more kneel down on Saturday, Mark, we may have been sitting at 399. But great accomplishment. And I think, by the way, I didn't take your text message to me about wanting to talk about the offense as condescending at all. The way I interpret it is Mark is being genuine, and you did come off the week prior. Rutgers played the Buckeyes, and Ohio State. Actually, Iowa outgained Ohio State, and I know it's not apples to apples. It's just not. You can't play that transitive property game like we love to in sports. But Iowa actually outgained the Buckeyes against this exact defense. Now, I do think there's something to be said. People who ask the question, well, did that game take something out of Rutgers? Oh, potentially. I mean, I don't know that, but I have a lot of trust in Schiano as a defensive guy. So one would think that they would be able to respond, but Iowa did a really good job on both ends. I mean, Monunga is maybe the best running back, or at least one of the 2 or 3 best running backs in the conference. They shut him down in this game. I mean, he led all rushers in the Big Ten Conference heading into the game, whether he's the best rusher or not. And they did a really nice job on what's his face at quarterback,
Gavin Wimsatt.
He was pretty much corralled. He really wasn't able to use his feet much on Saturday. And I just keep going back to the offense definitely looked better. And maybe it was a one-off, and they'll go right back to looking like a typical Brian Ferentz-led offense, Kirk Ferentz-led offense. But I just keep going back to how good this defense is and how good Phil Parker is at his job. Because I remember back to week 1 or week 2, he kind of struggled at times against Utah State. They kind of went up and down the field a little bit, only gave up 14 points. Kind of the same thing against Iowa State. They gave up a late touchdown there to kind of make it a little bit too close for comfort. It was 20-14. Cyclones had a chance late. Of course, defense held. But people were kind of saying, the defense is going to be good, but it's not going to be what it was in 21. They took a step back, and that makes sense because they lost Campbell, they lost Benson, they lost Moss. I think this defense is every bit as good as it was last year. And that's incredible to say. And I said that to Coach Patterson. What Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson have done, and there was a lot of criticism about Nick Jackson those first couple of weeks because I think it took him some time to get integrated into this 4-3 system, this Big Ten defense, and he has been phenomenal. And honestly, Mark, if you had to ask me, hey, who would you rather have, Higgins and Jackson or Campbell and Benson? I don't think it's as clear cut as some may think. I think I'd rather take Jackson over Benson, although Benson was really productive. I'd probably take Campbell over Higgins, but it's closer than you think. And that's credit not only to Phil, it's credit to Seth Wallace. It's credit to Brad Heinrichs and the Swarm Collective that, I know they were a part of getting Nick Jackson to come to Iowa with NIL. So, man, he's been the biggest transfer portal success story. And that defense has just been, even without Noah Shannon, they were down Jamari Harris, their second best corner for the first 4 games. They haven't missed a beat, and they've not lost a game because of the defense. I mean, they lost that Penn State game 31-0. The offense was putrid and couldn't get off the field. Defense was on the field for 100 snaps in that game. And then, of course, Minnesota, what was the final score of that game? 14-10 or
12-10.
12-10. So, I mean, it's what else is the defense supposed to do? So if they, and I made the comment after the game, if they played like they played against Rutgers, and I believe that's a good team, not a great team, a good team, if they played like that offensively and defensively, they would pretty much guaranteed be 9-1 right now. Okay. They would be 9-1. And there's a chance they'd be undefeated because I know that 31-0 defeat looms large and it was a huge margin, but it just changes everything on both sides of the ball when your offense can't move and can't move the chains and flip the field. So, it's just amazing. And this goes back 2 to 3 years now, of course. And again, doesn't mean it's going to be maintained or sustained into Illinois and Nebraska. But this defense, this is exactly what Urban Meyer talked about earlier in the season on the Big Ten Network when he said, hey, this defense just needs an average offense to be contending nationally, they were that type of team Saturday. On Saturday, they were that type of team. They ran the ball effectively. Deacon Hill, for the most part, was pretty good. Made a really bad decision down near the goal line into the first half. Terrible throw, terrible decision. But for the most part, they moved the ball against a good defense. 400 yards isn't a ton of yards, but for Iowa, it's a ton of yards. And if you could consistently be 350 plus in that category each and every week, they'd have a chance in every game because of how good this defense is. And by the way, real quick, Drew Stevens missed a field goal from 47. He has a really odd percentage and track record from between 40 and 49 yards. It's very strange. Somebody even joked with me right before that kick and said, hey, should we take a 5-yard penalty here to get him 50 plus? Because he's perfect. He's perfect from 50 plus, Mark. And you go back to his high school years and his college days, he has got a very poor record in the 40s. So inside of 40 and plus 50, he is excellent. So he's got that little no man's land, I guess if you want to call it that, to work on, because he's got a possibility of being an NFL prospect here in a couple of years. But he missed a kick, and I love the fact. I'll tell you, best moment of Kirk's press conference today was he brought up officiating, and I don't know that he'll get fined for it, but I think he's still a little bit, and I don't blame him. He's still a little bit sour about what happened against Minnesota. And he didn't bring up a specific call Saturday, but he brought up these reviews and conclusive evidence. And I love the fact that he did, because I didn't hear a bunch of people talking about it after the game, but I went on the postgame show with Don Patterson and Tom Kakert, and I said that was one of the worst calls we want to talk about going by the books and following the rules as they lie and how they're written. That Caleb Brown overturn on the 2-point conversion, I think, is one of the worst calls I've seen all year. And I'll tell you why. Because we got that. It was as clear as day. They had great angles from every direction, okay? And from every direction, it was inconclusive. And they called it good on the field. It's 2-point conversion, catch and score. They called it good on the field. For them to come back and say it was conclusive evidence that his knee was down short is absolute malarkey. And people are like, well, why are you complaining about that 22-0? Well, imagine how consequential that would be. If it was, they're down 24-22 and they need a 2-point conversion. It didn't make a difference in this game, but we see these types of blunders. And I do believe that's an example of a major blunder. It's not in the moment. It's exactly how I would deem what happened against Minnesota. You had an opportunity to go to replay and you botched it. You screwed it up for one reason or another. And Kirk brought up the whole idea of conclusive evidence, and he's right. The whole idea of having instant replay is to only make a change if it's 100% certain, and you just cannot possibly argue that was 100% certain. Did you see the play that I'm talking about, Mark?
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I completely agree. Now, if I was just making the call, if the call had not been made, it's a call that you're making based on the replay, I would tend to think that he was down. But that's beside the point, of course. The call was made on the field, and it was not conclusive in any such way.
And that's what Kirk was saying. It's not a matter of, I look at the replay and I think we got it wrong.
Yeah.
No, that's not how the rule is supposed to be enforced and how replay is supposed to be enforced. So I don't know what the answer is, but
replay is to overturn a missed call, a clearly missed call.
Correct. And I actually don't know that he was down. I mean, it's so close when you look at that shin. If he hadn't had that layer of sock or whatever that was on his shin, we probably could have, we could have probably been certain that he wasn't down, but it was just so close. But good to see him get involved. I mean, it's been a long time coming. It took an injury to Deontay Vines to get him going. It sounds like he's back in the good graces of Iowa. Kirk was very complimentary of Caleb after the game. And kudos to him, because there were rumors swirling several weeks back that he was kind of in the doghouse and then people expected him to transfer. And maybe he still will. Like maybe after the season, he just enters the portal and was gone. But it was good to see him catch a touchdown. Should have had the 2-point conversion. They got him the ball out of the backfield. He's their best athlete on the outside. I still want them to get Seth Anderson involved. Nico has been playing well. It's just hard to get a lot of catches in this offense, but just really nice to see him involved. Deontay Vines is going to be out for a while. Sounds like not expected to be back this Saturday. So they'll need Caleb. They'll need Nico. They'll need Seth. And man, the tight end room, we talked about how deep that room was prior to the season. it has been decimated. I've never seen the tight end room suffer from injuries as much as they have this year. Luke Lachey goes down, season-ending injury. Eric All goes down, season-ending injury. Steven Stylianos was out Saturday. He was their third tight end, of course. He was in street clothes on Saturday. Don't know if he's going to be back. Then Addison Estringa's out there, and he goes down during the game, and you're like, what is happening? So then you're down to true freshman Zach Ortworth, who catches a 51-yarder on a beautiful play call and good execution. Nice throw from Deacon Hill. Didn't overthrow him, didn't underthrow him. Hit him in stride, hit him for 50+. True freshman, first career catch. Nice to see. They got Johnny Pascuzzi, a walk-on from the Kansas City area who's playing now as well. You might be seeing some Grant Leaper, the gray shirt. He might end up showing up if one of those guys goes down. So just nice to see a number of guys stepping up. It just shows how good Iowa is, whether it's you give credit to Brian or Kirk or whoever. LeVar Woods has coached tight ends in the past. Abdul Hodge certainly now. They do such a good job of getting those guys ready. And I've been high on Addison Estringa since he got here. He had, 8 catches Saturday. He was the safety blanket for Deacon Hill. And until Lachey's back, it sounds like they may get Lachey back for the bowl game. Maybe. That's a possibility right now. Until then, Estringa's probably going to be the number one guy, even if Stylianos comes back.
It would be a great debate for best defense in the Big Ten because I think there are 4 in the conversation that are just lights out. The other point to make, and I'm not going to make any kind of determination on who's the best. I could take an argument from any one of the 4 teams, meaning Iowa, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State. And then also if Iowa continues to progress this passing game and they can't make the kind of mistake, you wouldn't think that they could make the kind of mistake like they did at the end of the first half. And I was impressed and also applauding that they were taking that kind of approach with the 3-0 lead, because you can correct me certainly if I'm wrong, because I'm no expert in how they approach every game. I watch the better games. But to see them with a 3-0 lead, not just, okay, run, kneel down, okay, go to the break, and them press the ball downfield, drive it downfield, pass after pass after pass, and get inside the 10 or 15-yard line, then Deacon Hill makes the mistake, okay, but just that they went out there with that approach and also executed, I was impressed with. And if they are able to put up that type of an approach and execute and those kind of numbers in the passing game, I'm talking like a modest 15 to 25, 200 yards, probably need no turnovers, but maybe one at a particular time where it isn't crucial, or early second quarter in a Big Ten championship game, they can win. They could win a Big Ten championship game.
Sure.
I'm not predicting it. I don't believe it's a high probability. I think it's 20 or 25%, something in that range.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Ohio State's offense has taken a significant step back from last year. Is that fair?
It has, but it's getting there.
Okay. Well,
it's like coming on. Well,
you say that, but they just produced less yards against Rutgers a week ago than Iowa did this past weekend.
I know, but if you would have seen that game, you would have. You may have seen it a little bit different.
Well, they threw a pick 6. I didn't watch the whole thing. I knew Rutgers threw a pick 6, and those were some of the points. But no, I believe me, I'm not picking Iowa to be Ohio State championship game. But I think what you said is true, because I don't think Ohio State's offense is as good as it was last year. No. And part of that has to be C.J. Stroud, and what he's doing in the league right now is total evidence of that. And I think maybe he was a little underappreciated nationally, but. Iowa's defense is going to keep you in games. Even that 42-3 game, they were in it at halftime. They were in the Ohio State game a year ago at halftime with that abysmal offense. They were in the Penn State game at halftime this year. The defense is going to show up regardless of how good the other team is. It's just a matter of, can you get something out of your offense to keep you in the game in the second half? And that's what they have not had against Ohio State last year, against Michigan the year before, and against Penn State this year. You're right. If the offense plays like it did Saturday, they can stay in a game and give themselves a chance late. If they don't, if they revert right back to what we saw against Northwestern and Minnesota, it's going to probably be very similar to what we saw against Penn State or Michigan or Ohio State. And they're going to be 10-3 and then probably going to Orlando or something of that nature.
We need you on the main channel more often to balance out. And I understand the Michigan, Ohio State, and to a lesser degree, Penn State, and of course they can't win now. The narrative that they own the conference, and they do, and all of that, and they've earned it, and they've got the results and all of that. And people would be laughing right now if this was not a pro Iowa crowd, because I've already thrown it out there, and I get it. And most likely that will be the case, but it's not a foregone conclusion in my mind.
I agree. But that narrative, Iowa has built the narrative, the stigma with that Iowa offense. That's going to take a long time to overcome. Now, if Kirk Ferentz goes out and hires, Steve Sarkisian, or is he an offensive coach? I'm trying to think of a big offensive name. What's the guy that was at Texas?
Well, Steve Sarkisian's there now.
I just thought I said Steve Sarkisian. I meant the guy before.
I'll figure out some names. Big names, offensive coordinators.
Who's the guy there before? Tom
Herman?
Tom Herman, right? Example, like if they go out and get Tom Herman, then maybe the narrative shifts quicker. But like say they go Paul Chryst, even if Paul Chryst makes this offense next year efficient, it's going to take a long time for that stigma to go away. And unless it's really elevated, which it probably won't be until Kirk leaves, it's probably always going to carry that weight, that stigma. So I'm fine with that. Like they're going to go into that championship game, assuming they get there, they got to win one of these next two games. They're going to go into the championship game heavy underdogs. And, they were heavy underdogs 2 years ago. And I thought they had a chance then. From a different perspective, I thought they had a chance then. But very similar as far as team makeup. Still a really strong defense, special teams, struggling offense. If they come out this weekend against an Illinois team that, you would think is typically stronger in the defensive end because of Brett Bielema, their head coach, but struggled last week against Indiana defensively. If they can go out and do that this week and do what they did last week and put up 400 plus for 2 weeks in a row, I don't think they're going to do that. But if they were to somehow do that, then we're like, okay, this is something different. We haven't seen 2 weeks of this in Big Ten play in a long time. I mean, like even go back to 2017, Mark. Remember, and they had games and they had stretches where they were pretty good offensively. But when we said, wow, look at that offense, 2017 against Ohio State, they followed up the next week with an abysmal 80 total yard performance against Wisconsin with no offensive points scored. So they've been down this road before, and I just need to see more than one game. But Illinois is not Wisconsin on the road of 6 years ago, and I think they're vulnerable. And I think Iowa needs to win this game because I don't want to be, if you're an Iowa fan, you don't want to be going to Lincoln on Black Friday with potentially the West on the line again, given the fact that they lost out on the opportunity last week. That's got to be the message that's being preached behind those closed doors this week, is win it this week. And I know Kirk's not going to talk about division titles or taking one game at a time, but he needs to tell us, guys, you can win a division this week. And then we just beat Nebraska for revenge, for positioning purposes, for bowl purposes, for momentum purposes, and you're looking at a 10-2 regular season.
Before we talk more in depth on Illinois, one stat that I have touted this week, and maybe I tend to tout these stats when I think they're a little bit more clever, and when I've devised them myself, I didn't read it. I thought, let's figure this out. 2 weeks ago, we had a 4-way tie for first place in the Big Ten West. 4 teams were 3-2. Since then, Iowa's taking care of business, won their 2 games. The other 3 are 0-6. They've both gone on 2-game losing streaks. Yeah. Minnesota, Wisconsin, Nebraska. And the 6 teams that they've lost to,
not good,
are 7-29.
I know,
against the rest of the Big Ten.
The West is as bad as it's ever been. And Don Patterson brought an interesting comment up to me during the postgame show Saturday. He said, not only does Iowa owe it to itself to go out and win the division and win these next 2 games and head into the Big Ten championship 10-2 with momentum and giving the division a chance. They owe it to the division. They owe it to the conference. They don't want to back their way into the championship game. They kind of backed their way into the championship game in 2021 because Wisconsin lost to Minnesota during week 13. They need to go in this game on Saturday, win against Nebraska, be 10-2, and at least give the Big Ten, the West, something to hang their hats on. Because imagine what that would be. I mean, imagine if they were 10-2, they go to the championship game and win. Like that would cause, I don't know that it would affect, like if Michigan goes undefeated, assuming, they don't drown from their own tears. If Michigan goes undefeated, Mark, and they lose to Iowa, they're probably still in, I would think. Same with Ohio State, I would think. If they're undefeated and they lose to Iowa, they're probably still in. But that would affect things. And maybe Iowa wouldn't make the playoff, but it would be one of the bigger surprises in college football this year.
I'll quickly take us to the other end of the spectrum. What would look, and it would just accentuate the reputation of the Big Ten West. Iowa could lose both of these games and still make the Big Ten championship.
Correct.
Or somebody's going to make it, obviously. Somebody could be 5-4.
But that's backing your way into it, in my opinion. Like
exactly.
They need to win out. They need to win these next 2 games.
And if that team is either Minnesota or Nebraska, let's say at 5-4, or Wisconsin, they're going to have a worse overall record because they've all lost non-conference games.
Right.
And then they go get blitzed, 45-10 in the championship game. Then it just.
And the division is a complete failure. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we move on to a new era in Big Ten football regardless. All right. Let's talk Illinois. This game, of course, was 9-6, much different Illinois situation last year as they won the game with one of the top defenses in the country, lost most of those players. Not Johnny Newton, though. He's still around. We got Sonny Verma here from Illini Cast. Let me pronounce that with the right phonetics there. Illini Cast for Sonny. And Sonny, as we lead you into this, I'm going to tell you that I just gushed over John Paddock 2 weeks ago. I just thought this was remarkable.
Yeah.
To be down to Minnesota, you're down to your last play. It's 4th and 11. Your quarterback's laying on the field, hurt, Luke Altmaier. It's 4th and 11. You're at your own 15-yard line. And he trots onto the field completely cold, throws a dart to Isaiah Williams, first down. 2 plays later, he's gunning a 46-yarder down the seam to win the game. Like, that's incredible. Now he throws for 507 yards last week. What's going on with this guy?
And the best part is a lot of people don't really know his background story. And it's one of those stories that makes you kind of just fall in love with sports. His great-grandfather, he played for the Illini. His grandfather played for the Illini. His uncle played for the Illini. He went to school in Michigan, but there's pictures of him in blue and orange jackets and backpacks. He just was never quite big enough to earn that scholarship from a Power 5 team. So essentially he got a scholarship offer from Ball State. He sat on the bench for 4 years. He was finally able to start his last year. He was able to start. Put up decent numbers for a MAC quarterback, nothing that exactly jumped out at you. But then this past offseason, our backup quarterback, Art Sikowski, decided to take a job as a graduate assistant instead of prolonging his college football career. Probably the right call. Brett Bielema essentially gave John Paddock a phone call and said, "Hey, we don't have a scholarship available, but we know, you have a family legacy here. If you would like to come on, we have a battle for our backup quarterback spot." I mean, he said starting quarterback spot as well, but it was kind of, pretty much assured that Luke Altmaier would win that job. So Paddock's story with Illinois, it's, again, his whole family table's got something to say, a different Illinois story. And he came in that awful Luke Altmaier game where he had 4 interceptions against Penn State, and Paddock looked clueless. He looked like he had never played D1 football in his life. So as you're talking about, when he comes in at the end of this Minnesota game where we need to score on that drive to win the game, I'm ready to turn it off. I'm so frustrated. But he goes 3 for 3, 86 yards. He graded the highest PFF grade in history of college football. And then he follows it up with that performance last Saturday. It's one of those things. If you watch any interviews with the guy, he's always got a smile. He's got a certain level of confidence, and I don't want to call it cockiness because that gives it a bad connotation, but you can tell he feels like he's so blessed to be in the position that he's in, and he's wearing the blue and orange, the colors he'd been wearing since high school, about the team that he'd been hearing about from his family his entire life. There's no man more on top of the world right now than John Paddock.
Well, Sonny, I want to make sure that we don't have a whole lot of time. We want to make sure we do this matchup justice. So I'll throw it to Corey in regards to what he wants to know about Illinois football and maybe their best path to victory here. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. You mentioned it earlier, Mark, 9-6 a year ago. And Sonny, that was probably the low point of Iowa's 2022 campaign. They had a chance to win the West still heading into the final game of the year. But man, that 9-6 game, that was as busy of a post-game show as I've ever had, with people who were just absolutely ready to be done with the Ferentz era. And I don't think that had anything to do directly with the linkage to Brett Bielema, but I'm a big Brett Bielema fan, for the record. Mark knows this. And of course, Bielema is an Iowa guy. In fact, he was brought up a couple times during today's press conference with Kirk, partly because he's coaching this game. And the other part is because Iowa's going to be honoring a bunch of seniors on Saturday, who a lot of those guys have had similar stories to what Brett did while he was at Iowa. And so I got a lot of respect for Brett Bielema. I know Kirk does as well. And let's not forget, I mean, the one guy we didn't bring up, I mean, you talk about Witherspoon being drafted in the first round of the draft last year. Tommy DeVito, is he not playing? Isn't he like starting right now in the league, or at least he did a week or two ago?
Yeah.
Yep, he was the starting quarterback for the Giants last Sunday.
So, I mean, it makes sense to an extent why Illinois is kind of taking a step back, but absolutely. I mean, Paddock, who would have expected that? And offensively, you would expect if a Brett team is going to take a step back, it'd be offensively, but it appears like they've done a pretty good job developing that room. And I know Art Sitkowski transferred in from Rutgers and just kind of didn't work out, I guess, but dealt with some injuries. Didn't he have a shoulder injury or something at some point as well? So, but yeah, I'm excited to see. I think particularly the biggest thing for me to watch is how the Illinois defensive backfield plays against Deacon Hill, because last week, Hill finally broke through. And I don't know how much of Iowa football you watched, Sonny, but man, we've had week after week of 30 yards passing, 40 yards passing, and it's not like Iowa's tearing it up on the ground. But finally, last week they achieved some semblance of balance on the offensive side of things. And I know maybe Illinois' defensive backfield took a little bit of a step back last year with Witherspoon being drafted, but that's still I perceive that as a pretty good unit, and I would expect Brett and that staff to have those guys ready. Deacon Hill does not. One thing that concerns me for Iowa fans, this is something that I brought up to Coach Patterson before. Deacon Hill does not have that grooved, kind of repeatable throwing motion. And the reason I say that is, we're talking about somehow replicating what he did last week. And that's why I tend to lean more towards he's probably not going to do that. Now, Brian, I give credit to Brian and Kirk, especially Brian, didn't give Deacon Hill enough rope to hang himself with. And Don Patterson kind of compared it to what they did with Joe Labus in the bowl game against Kentucky. Make it very simple, make the game plan simple, but can they execute? Are they going to be able to do that against this Illinois defense? Execute a simple game plan like they did against Rutgers last week? Because again, you're going to be looking at tape from a week ago against Rutgers or from this past Saturday. And I would think there's going to be some things that, Iowa runs naked so much. And Don has talked about that. Like, why aren't teams stopping the naked? It just doesn't make sense. So, man, I would think Brett and this defensive staff, I don't know how, Sonny, how involved do you think Brett Bielema is on a week-to-week basis with defensive game planning?
More so now compared to the beginning of the season. When Ryan Walters left for Purdue, Brett hired in-house. It was a former defensive backs coach, Aaron Henry. Aaron Henry played for Brett in Wisconsin during the Wisconsin days. So this is his first time at the level of defensive coordinator. So I'd imagine that, Brett, with his experience and the abundance of his experience being on the defensive end, helping Aaron out a lot. And we're a completely different team since essentially that Nebraska game, which pretty much everyone saw that Friday night where it's a 27 final and Nebraska played awful and Illinois just played more awful. It was just, Illini Nation was down on its, we're feeling down on ourselves. We're questioning the Brett Bielema hire. But since then, we essentially played 4 games very well and just had one bad quarter. And that was the Wisconsin game, that fourth quarter, where Johnny Newton was ejected at the beginning of the quarter, and we lost a 18-point lead in the fourth quarter to lose the game. Otherwise, we'd have won 4 games in a row at this point. As you kind of talked about, like our defensive line, obviously led by Newton, he's the only player I've ever seen who's literally guarded by 3 guys almost every snap, and he doesn't take many snaps off. You saw that against Indiana, that the times he does take he goes off the field, the plays immediately run your running back straight at the tackle. Just take advantage of when he's gone. When he's back in, all right, find a different game plan. You talked about Witherspoon being gone, but he's not the only one. Illinois lost 3 defensive backs in the top 70 picks to the NFL. So we lost a lot of experience back there, and it was kind of replaced with freshmen and transfers, most of them being underclassmen. So, they're having some coverage issues. They're having some mistakes, and usually the way our game goes is whether our defensive line can get to the quarterback fast enough so that he doesn't have enough time to exploit the hole that our defensive backs will inevitably leave.
How much have you seen as far as influence from Jim Leonhard this year?
I mean, it's hard to really know and quantify just because he is a defensive analyst. He's with the program from Monday to Friday, and he's back home essentially scouting of future opponents during the weekend. So he's never really interviewed. He's never really talked about when it comes to Brett mentioning him. So it's hard to really know. But you figure he's kind of just trying to associate himself with Brett and stay in the coaching game because he's going to want a job next year.
USC has probably already reached out to him potentially. He's home during the weekend. You don't think he's up in the press box somewhere?
He's not. No, he's not. He's the agreement that they have is he's in Champaign, he's in Champaign Monday to Friday, and then he gets the weekends. It's up to him whether he wants to go scout another opponent, but he's not there game day on Saturdays and Sundays.
That's interesting. So that's an Illinois approach then, Mark, to the analyst, because I'm pretty sure John Budmeyer, for instance, is up in the press box. I mean, I'm assuming. I know he trots out on the field. I know he's there on game days because he trots out in the field with Iowa pregame. So I'm surprised. I mean, maybe that's what it took to get him there.
Exactly. It might not be an Illinois thing. It might be a Jimmy Leonhard, hey, you want my services? Let me kind of dictate what I want to do this season. Okay.
Well, and that's, to me, that's a disadvantage. Now, I didn't know that until now, but when I heard Brett had landed Jim, I'm thinking, man, what an add to that defensive, especially with the departure of Ryan Walters. So, no, I'm going to be intrigued to see. Obviously, both these teams have different quarterbacks than what we saw a year ago. And both, I mean, I know Paddock has looked really good. Altmyer's went through his struggles just like Deacon Hill has. And, you brought up Johnny Newton. I mean, that guy, they're going to have an issue if they can't figure out a way to slow him down. Like, that's the one thing with Deacon Hill. We keep talking about his lack of mobility. How many games, Mark, have we seen, especially go back even into 21, even into 19, the interior of the line collapses. And if you have an immobile quarterback that can't flush, 4 o'clock or 9 o'clock and get out, make a spin move and get out, and throw out of the pocket, you're going to struggle. Even Nate Stanley went through those struggles, and Nate had more mobility than Deacon Hill did. So that's what would be concerning to me, is Deacon is very much dependent on either naked or a clean pocket. And so my guess is they're going to run a lot of naked. I would think that that's going to be well scouted by people like Jim Leonhard and Brett Bielema and that staff. But that's probably, the defensive backfield, the changes. Again, I haven't watched nearly to Sonny's extent of watching Illini football this year. But then, how does Iowa protect Deacon Hill? Because they're also not healthy up front. When Iowa's down, Logan Jones is likely out, their center. He didn't play. He played one drive this past Saturday. Tyler Ellsbury came in for him. Rusty Feth has been banged up. Bo Stevens is out again. And they have pieces in there to play. Connor Colby's played a lot of snaps. Like I mentioned, Ellsbury, Feth. Nick DeYoung, I think, is back. And he's going to probably factor in along with Richmond and then Dunker on the other side. But they're banged up just like everybody else is. So Johnny Newton's not the guy you want to go up against when you're already ailing in some regard.
Yeah, and our season has kind of turned around with the emergence of Caden Fagan. He's a 4-star running back that we had gotten, and once basically Reggie Love went down early in the season, Reggie Love was performing pretty much average as a running back, but Caden is a tank, and it took him like 80 some odd snaps before he had a negative yardage play, and he's been playing great, and then he got hurt in the first quarter of the last game against Indiana, and Reggie Love came in and he got 140 some odd yards. So it was nice to see Reggie Love do that. I just don't know if that was more of against an Indiana defense. But Caden, we have not had an update on injury-wise, whether he's going to be able to play on Saturday. And I think offensively, to keep your defense honest, like we're going to need him there because, again, he's a big bruising running back. Illinois actually does have pretty good skill players between Isaiah Williams, our quarterback room, whichever one starts, which Brett's not letting the cat out of the bag right now, and a couple of the other receivers and Caden, who I just mentioned. But if that running back, the running option is not being respected, then that means Luke Altmaier becomes our running back. And from what we've seen is from the first half of the season, when Luke is your main rushing guy, it's not going to bode well for us.
And correct me if I'm wrong, does Brett kind of move guys around? Because technically Newton's an edge guy, but he moves around, doesn't he?
Absolutely, yeah. He every snap he could be in a different spot.
Yeah, and who's the other guy? I know that Kirk was asked about it. Is it the transfer? Is it Daxon?
We have Keith Randolph.
Okay, maybe I'm thinking of Randolph.
The law firm was known as Newton and Randolph. We have Gabe Jackus, who was a former linebacker who wasn't really performing up to what his expectations were. We've kind of moved him to the defensive line. And again, the results are being spoken for by the last 4 games where we've kind of looked like the Illinois team that I thought we would, a good Big Ten West team. Now, obviously the first 6 games tarnished what this season could have been. But, here we are at this point. We still, if we win out Saturday and against Northwestern and Iowa loses out, and I think we can still make the Big Ten West, the championship, essentially. We would need Nebraska to beat Wisconsin and Nebraska to beat you guys. And if we win out, then somehow a team that Illinois fans gave up on about 6 weeks into the season could be representing the West because they hold the tiebreakers over the other teams.
Well, I gave up on them too, but shame on Illini fans. I'm not a fan. I just gave up on them. That is true. Yeah, you got this glut of 3 and 4 teams, and I was discounting the 3 and 4 teams that were down and jumped up. Everybody's looking at Minnesota, Wisconsin, Nebraska because they were in contention. This is a mess, or it could be. Iowa can obviously clean it all up and just win, but it will be a mess the final weekend of the season if Illinois wins this game.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. That's what this is a huge. I mean, it's easy to say, well, all Iowa has to do is win one of their last 2 games. It changes things. You lose this week, and then you got to go to Lincoln with all that pressure. They just need to win this week.
There will be people across the country, if Illinois would pull that off, that would be like, what? How in the world did that happen? Like, yeah, that's crazy that they're
including
still
Illini fans. After that Nebraska game, the mood was very down. That's all I can say.
Crazy stuff. Well, Sonny, we appreciate you being here. Corey needs to take off. Actually, Corey, if you need to go, we can let you go, and then Sonny and I will wrap it up. We'll do it
Sounds
that
good.
way.
Thank you, Mark. I look forward to it. Thank you for jumping on here, Sonny, and we'll have post-game coverage here and over at my channel Saturday. And for Hawkeye fans, for basketball fans, post-game coverage tonight. Your guys have a pretty good game tonight, big game tonight as well, Sonny, against Marquette.
I'm ready. Yep.
And I'm in Omaha right now for Iowa Creighton to follow. Same networks for FS1, so we'll have post-game coverage after. Thank you, Mark.
Nice.
We'll talk to you later in the week.
Thanks, Corey. Enjoy. Yeah, so just a quick few notes. Let's see, what have we missed here with Illinois? So again, that scenario is Iowa's got to lose the 2 games. So Illinois then beats Northwestern in the final game, and they need Wisconsin to lose 1 of 2. Does it matter which one?
Who does Wisconsin play the last game?
Minnesota.
So
there's
we
an
own the
assumption that Minnesota's going to lose to Ohio State this week.
Yeah. Well, we own the tiebreaker over Minnesota regardless because we beat them head to head, and we beat. So the 2 teams we don't have the tiebreaker over is Nebraska and Wisconsin.
Sure.
And there's, I think, essentially, if there's like again, the Big Ten West is a complete mess. There's a certain tie level that all the teams will be tied. So Wisconsin would lose the tiebreaker to someone else, which would kind of elevate Illinois on top, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I did a video like 3 weeks ago breaking down all the tie-breaking scenarios, but Illinois was not on the radar at the time. So yeah, the obviously the 2-way tie becomes just an obvious head-to-head, and then the 3-way tie becomes extremely complicated across the board. Fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those where we don't think it's going to happen, but that's kind of where all the pressure is on who Brett's going to start on Saturday. Is it Altmaier, who supposedly should be cleared at this point, or do you just go with this hot hand? I just read a stat before I got on today that John Paddock had more passing yards on Saturday than either Iowa quarterback has had all season long. That's just in one game. So but again, it's against an Indiana defense where, they were just giving up holes left and right. And Isaiah Williams caught for 200 plus yards, 200 yards, I think. And we almost had 3 guys get 100. So we know we're going to be facing something a little tougher on Saturday.
Yeah, this Iowa defense is obviously a serious deal. They are something else. Northwestern has a shot in this, right? So Northwestern's path is, if they win their final 2 games, they're 5-4. They'd have the head-to-head against Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota. They would not against Nebraska and Iowa. So yeah, if Iowa falters, there's probably going to be a 3-way tie of some sort, most likely.
And there's going to be a lot of pressure on them because that Nebraska game's on Black Friday. So, I mean, if they were to lose to Nebraska that Friday, you're talking like 2 or 3 different teams that Saturday that know that they have a chance to go to Indianapolis. And so, what a send-off for the Big Ten West.
We could have a number 1 team in the country playing like a 7-5 team in the Big Ten championship game.
It would, yeah. I mean, it's just going to so actually, Mark, I have a question for you. Do you enjoy this, like, sort of like the innocence of college football when you have divisions like this, or do you just want like how it's going to be next year, all one format, or one conference, no divisions? Like I do feel like, and maybe it's because I am a fan of a team in the Big Ten West, that there's something like there's a purity to it. Like that's what makes college a little different from other sports. That you have different parts of the country play different sort of ways. You have certain divisions play certain ways. Certain conferences play different ways.
I gotcha. You don't want it to be uniform,
right? It's just different.
Yeah, like every it's almost like if you're a baseball fan, you like the designated hitter in one league and the pitcher hits in the other league, and it's just different. And you leave it that way, and you don't pound your fist to say everybody has to play by the same rules. Yeah, I like the quirk. I'll use another word, quirkiness of, because there are going to be people all over the place, and there already are, that will just put their nose up at whomever comes out of the West. Even if Iowa wins these 2 games, they're going to be 10-2, but they're just not considered anywhere close to the East champion, that it's a tainted championship game, and those 2 or 3 teams in the East should just play again and all of that. And I get that from a quality standpoint, but I like the quirkiness of this situation. I love these kind of scenarios.
Exactly right. Like, it's silly. I get it. But next Saturday has the potential to be an extremely exciting final week of college football, especially in particular in the Big Ten. For one side, and of course, you have the game on the other side, which will probably dictate who's going to make it to the championship game. But the following week isn't going to be too much of a game, but you're going to have 3 or 4 fan bases who are just going to be locked into their TVs, screaming at the refs and just locked in, trying to figure out what's going to happen. And including, and it's not going to happen again. Me as a fan of Illinois football, I'm not going to be going into the final weekend of the Big Ten conference schedule and be like, oh, are we going to make the Big Ten championship next week? So this is kind of one of a, final joyride, for, smaller teams like ours.
Yeah, I guess the craziest possibility for the final weekend would be, of course, Illinois' got to win. Minnesota beats Ohio State. I'm going the crazy route. Northwestern wins. Nebraska wins. Nebraska, whether it's Nebraska or Minnesota or Wisconsin, they're playing each other, so one negates the other. So regardless of who wins, I guess Nebraska would make it a little more crazy if they won. But you would have, 4 teams that would have a chance the final weekend: Iowa, Illinois, Nebraska, or Wisconsin, and Northwestern. Yeah.
And we'd get the result of Iowa, Nebraska on that Friday.
Yeah.
So,
that would be fun.
Yeah. If Iowa wins that Friday night, then they wrap it up anyway.
Yeah.
But, if they don't, then that Saturday, that's going to be must-watch TV.
Absolutely. Good stuff.
Mark, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Who would you start? Luke Altmaier or John Paddock on Saturday?
I was running through my brain as you were mentioning that, because I didn't know Altmaier's health status. So I didn't really even consider that in the way Paddock's playing. Wow.
Yeah.
Because he's the guy next year.
He's got 2 years left.
Yeah, of course. Let me ask you this question before I answer that question. Considering everything around him, offensive line play, skill position, are you reasonably optimistic, pleased with his progress this year?
I am. He's had one awful game, which everybody saw on TV, that 4-interception game against Penn State. And he is prone to a turnover every now and then, but that just kind of comes naturally as a younger quarterback. This is his first season as a full-time starter. But the angle that he gives that, obviously Paddock doesn't, is Luke can win games with his legs as well. He has his issues. The biggest difference between the two quarterbacks is Paddock makes decisions very quickly. And, between snap and the time he throws the ball, it was like the biggest and the fastest in Big Ten this year. Whereas Luke, maybe because he's such a young quarterback, does tend to hold on to it a little too long, which ends up leading to a sack or two that more than he needs to be taking. But if there's nothing, if the wide receivers are covered, Luke can also basically just, scramble and get you 5, 6, 30, 35 yards on a single play too. So that's kind of the difference between the two.
Now, I'm looking for a point spread. I'm guessing it's not that egregious. It's right where I thought it was going to be. Actually, I should have said it, 3.5, because we got people in the chat that think it's ludicrous that Illinois thinks they're going to win. Well,
it's funny. Like, I do have a group of Iowa fans, and I watched your show yesterday, the Big Ten live show, and I was just shocked at how, I don't know what the word is, but uppity Iowa fans were towards the spread only being 3.5. And now, don't get me wrong, if the Iowa that played against Rutgers shows up on Saturday, you guys probably win, Iowa wins and wins soundly. But Illinois' got a pretty good offense. And their weakness, their defense, will be going up against the Iowa offense. And so I almost think it's a matter of whose weakness performs better. That I think 3.5 is actually a very reasonable line.
There's been a number of times this year that I thought the line was a little short on Iowa, but I was wrong. So last week, yeah, they were only a 1-point favorite, but that game didn't get out of hand. It just kind of crawled along. It was 3-0 at half. Then it was 6-0, and they didn't score a touchdown to really give them much of a cushion until sometime in the fourth quarter to get to like 12-0. So it's not like they blew them out from the beginning. They were a field goal favorite against Minnesota. That was the game that they lost. Should have won. Controversial call, all that business. But they were only a field goal favorite against Minnesota at home. They were only a 5-point favorite against Northwestern and only won the game by 3. So I have no issue with the line being what it is. All right, good stuff. Sonny Verma, Illini Cast. Sonny, let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me, as Mark said, at Illini Cast. We released a couple episodes every week. We released one today with the Icon, which is basically the Illinois NIL collective. It's for everyone, though. It just kind of gives a viewpoints of what a foundation of what an NIL can and can't do. We try to have, a pregame and a postgame show for every matchup that we tend to have. And Illini Cast both on Twitter and on YouTube.
Very cool. All right, Sonny, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike.
Enjoy the game.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Also here at the Voice of College Football over on the main channel. So typically the College Football Playoff Rankings watch party is at 7 Eastern. However, tonight they are doing at ESPN what they do each and every year when they tip off the basketball season is put it between games. So I don't exactly know when that's going to be. I'm not going to sit here and like watch basketball. So I know exactly when they're going to deliver the rankings. So I'll figure out and see when the rankings come out and we will go live. It's going to be in the 9 to 9:30 range, I would think, somewhere in that range. So we will go live, not necessarily a watch party, but more of just a college football playoff rankings reaction. And many of you don't know where we at the Voice of College Football have ranked Iowa. So check out our top 25 that actually makes sense. All right, folks, appreciate you being here again. See you in a couple hours on the watch party over on the main channel for the college football playoff rankings. Give me a call. We'll talk college football. We'll talk rankings. And we will see you soon.